I raised my sister alone. At her wedding, her father-in-law insulted me in front of everyone. He lifted his champagne flute, smiled like some corporate villain from a primetime drama, and said, "I just hope this marriage brings some stability to your family." Lord knows she didn't get that growing up with him. He gestured toward me with a dismissive wave. Nervous chuckles rippled across the reception hall like stones skipping on water. My sister Claire froze beside her new husband. Her radiant smile cracked and went rigid. Her emerald eyes found mine across the room, guilt, regret, terror swimming in them. She knew I wouldn't let this slide. She also knew I'd never raise my voice or make a scene. I don't need to. I stood slowly from my table, smoothed down my navy dress, and locked eyes with William Thornton III. "Do you even know who I am?" His arrogant smirk wavered just slightly, but before I explain what happened next, let me take you back to where this all began. Claire was 6 when our mother overdosed in the bedroom next to ours in our cramped Chicago apartment. I was 16. I found Mom first, called 911, then held my baby sister while the paramedics worked. When the social workers came asking questions, I lied through my teeth. I signed Claire's school forms with shaky teenage handwriting. I packed her Pokemon lunchbox every morning and walked her to Jefferson Elementary before catching the bus to Lincoln High. Nobody asked questions. Nobody cared. As long as Claire showed up clean and fed, the system looked the other way. Our father? He'd vanished when Claire was 2, leaving nothing but unpaid bills and empty beer bottles. I made sure she had everything: ballet lessons at Miss Dorothy's dance studio, orthodontic work when her teeth came in crooked, birthday parties at Chuck E. Cheese with all her friends. I worked double shifts at Tony's Diner on weekends and took night classes at the community college until I couldn't keep up anymore. I gave up my acceptance to Northwestern University. Claire never knew about that letter. She got to stay soft because I learned how to be steel. People like William Thornton III, they don't understand quiet sacrifice. They mistake gentleness for weakness, mistake working-class roots for inferiority. They see calloused hands and think less than instead of worked for everything. The first time I met William was 6 months ago at the engagement party. His estate in Winnetka sprawled like something from a magazine: manicured lawns, circular driveway, windows that probably cost more than most people's cars. Inside, crystal chandeliers hung over marble floors, and every piece of furniture looked like it belonged in a museum. William looked at me like I was a stain on his Persian rug. "And what is it you do exactly?" he'd asked, swirling his scotch. "I run several businesses," I replied simply. "Ah, an entrepreneur." His tone dripped condescension. "That explains the practical footwear." I was wearing Italian leather boots. He wouldn't know quality if it bit him. But I let it slide that time. For Claire's sake. The second encounter happened 3 weeks before the wedding. I found Claire curled up on my couch, still in her work clothes from the law firm, mascara streaked down her cheeks like black rain. "What happened, honey?" I sat beside her, rubbing her back the way I had when she was small and had nightmares. "It's William," she whispered, voice breaking. "He said having you walk me down the aisle would make their family look low class. He wants his brother to do it instead, or maybe Pastor Richardson from their church." Something inside my chest cracked like ice under pressure. "What did you tell him?" "I told him I wouldn't get married unless you gave me away. That you're the only father I've ever known." Fresh tears spilled over. He laughed, Evelyn. He actually laughed and said, "We'll see about that." I pulled her close, kissed the top of her head that still smelled like the strawberry shampoo she'd used since high school. "Don't worry about William. You focus on being happy. I'll handle this." "What are you going to do?" I smiled, the same smile that had intimidated school bullies and convinced landlords to give us more time on rent. "What I've always done. Take care of my family." After Claire went to bed in her old room, I'd kept it exactly the same, down to the boy band posters. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of coffee that had gone cold hours ago. Time to do some research. William Thornton III wasn't just some rich guy. He was the CEO of Thornton Industries, a manufacturing conglomerate worth about $200 million. Old Chicago money, the kind that built railways and owned steel mills back when the city was growing up from swampland. His company had government contracts, employed thousands, donated to the right politicians and charities. But everyone has pressure points. Everyone has something to lose. I started making phone calls. Not threats, I'm not that kind of person. Just business inquiries. Perfectly legitimate questions about supply chains, vendor relationships, regulatory compliance. Amazing what you can learn when you know how to ask the right questions. By dawn, I had a plan. Not revenge. I don't believe in revenge. This was about respect. About making sure my sister never had to choose between her family and her future again. I opened my laptop and started typing emails. Time to cash in some favors and make some investments. William Thornton III was about to learn that underestimating Evelyn Martinez was his first mistake. His last mistake would be thinking he could intimidate my sister. The wedding was still 3 weeks away. Plenty of time to teach an old dog some new tricks about manners. I started small and quiet, the way I'd learned to handle everything in life. Patience had been my greatest teacher, and precision my sharpest tool. My first call was to Derek Washington, an old friend from the diner days who'd gone on to become a successful commodities broker. Derek, it's Evelyn. I need a favor. Anything for you, Ev. You kept me fed through 3 years of night school. I want to buy into some manufacturing suppliers. Specifically, the ones that serve Thornton Industries. Within 48 hours, I owned significant stakes in 3 of William's key suppliers, the company that provided his steel, his packaging materials, and his shipping logistics. Nothing illegal, nothing underhanded. Just good old-fashioned capitalism. Then came the subtle pressure. A delayed shipment here, a quality control issue there. Nothing that would hurt the workers, I'd never do that, but enough to make William's quarterly numbers look shaky. His stock price dipped 3% the first week. 7% by the second. My second call was to Maria Santos, my former professor from community college who now worked as an investigative journalist for the Chicago Tribune. Maria, remember when you said I should have been a detective instead of dropping out? Evelyn. Of course. What's going on? How would you like a story that could make your career? I'd been digging into William's business practices, and what I found made my stomach turn. Campaign contributions that skirted federal limits through shell companies. Environmental violations covered up with strategic donations to the right nonprofits. Tax shelters that would make a Swiss banker blush. All perfectly legal on paper. All morally bankrupt in reality. I can't believe someone hasn't caught this before, Maria said after reviewing my files. Money talks, and it usually tells people to look the other way. But election season is coming up, and these donation patterns tell quite a story. While Maria worked her magic with facts and figures, I made my third move. I called Tom Bradley, who ran the private investigation firm I sometimes hired for background checks on potential business partners. I need everything you can find on William Thornton III. Personal life, business dealings, family connections. The works. This sounds personal, Ev. It is. Someone hurt my family. Tom's report arrived 72 hours later. 23 pages of very interesting reading. Turns out William had a gambling problem he'd kept hidden from his wife and business partners. Weekend trips to Atlantic City that he wrote off as business conferences. High-stakes poker games in private clubs. Nothing illegal, but definitely not the kind of information a man like William would want public. The wedding was now 10 days away. Claire had stopped by twice, each time looking more radiant and excited. She'd found the perfect dress, a vintage-inspired gown that made her look like a movie star. She was handling the final details with the efficiency of the lawyer she'd become, thanks to the education I'd made sure she could afford. You seem different, she said during her last visit, studying my face over coffee. More. I don't know. Peaceful. Just happy for you, honey. You deserve all of this. What I didn't tell her was that I'd also been having lunch meetings with several board members of Thornton Industries. Friendly conversations about market conditions, business strategies, leadership transitions. Amazing how receptive people become when you're quietly buying up their competitors and making strategic investments in their industry. The trap was set. William had no idea what was coming. Neither did anyone else at that wedding. The morning of Claire's wedding dawned crisp and bright, one of those perfect October days in Chicago when the lake breeze carries just a hint of winter's promise. I stood at my bedroom window, watching the sun paint the skyline gold, and felt a calm settle over me that I hadn't experienced in months. Today wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. I dressed carefully in my navy dress, designer, though William would never know. I'd learned long ago that presentation matters, especially when you're about to deliver a lesson to someone who judges books by their covers. My shoes were Italian leather, the real thing this time, not the knockoffs I'd worn to his engagement party. The ceremony was held at St. Margaret's Episcopal Church, William's family church for 3 generations. I sat in the second row, watching my sister float down the aisle in her grandmother's pearls and the dress we'd chosen together. She was luminous, and for a moment, all my carefully laid plans faded into background noise. This was what mattered. This moment. Her happiness. But when William's eyes met mine during the exchange of vows, his smug little smile reminded me exactly why I was there. The reception was held at the Chicago Athletic Association, Old Money's favorite playground. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, waiters in white gloves serving champagne that cost more per bottle than most people spent on groceries in a month. William had spared no expense in showing off for his society friends. I mingled politely, making small talk with Claire's law school friends and her new in-laws. William's wife Patricia was actually quite lovely, a former teacher who'd raised 3 successful children and volunteered at the art museum. She complimented my dress and asked intelligent questions about my businesses. If circumstances were different, we might have been friends. William's brother Robert was cutting the wedding cake when my phone buzzed with a text from Maria. Story goes live in 30 minutes. Are you ready? I typed back, let's do this. The toasts began after dinner. Claire's college roommate spoke about late-night study sessions and shared dreams. Robert told embarrassing stories about the groom's childhood. Then William stood, champagne flute gleaming under the lights. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and arrogance that comes from never being told no. Today we welcome a beautiful young woman into our family. Polite applause. Claire beamed up at him. Claire has overcome so much to get here, William continued, and I felt the shift in the room's energy like barometric pressure before a storm. Growing up without proper guidance, without the stability every child deserves. My sister's smile faltered. But love conquers all, doesn't it? And I'm confident that being part of our family will give her the foundation she's been missing. He raised his glass higher. I just hope this marriage brings some stability to your family, my dear. Lord knows she didn't get that growing up with him. The gesture toward me was theatrical, dismissive. Scattered nervous, laughter rippled through the crowd like a disease. Claire went rigid beside her new husband. Her emerald eyes found mine across the reception hall, panic, shame, fear all swirling together. She knew I wouldn't let this pass. She also knew I'd never make a scene. I didn't need to. I stood slowly, setting down my champagne flute with deliberate care. The room fell silent except for the soft jazz quartet in the corner, still playing as if nothing had changed. Every eye turned toward me. Do you even know who I am? I asked, my voice carrying clearly across the reception hall. William's confident smirk wavered for just a fraction of a second. You're the sister, right? The guardian. I'm the reason she didn't end up in foster care, I said, taking a step forward. The reason she got to grow up as a beloved child instead of a case number. The reason she had ballet lessons and birthday parties and braces when her teeth came in crooked. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Patricia Thornton looked confused, glancing between her husband and me. I'm the one who worked double shifts at Tony's diner so she could have new school clothes every fall. The one who gave up Northwestern University so she could attend law school at DePaul. The one who made sure she never went hungry, never went without, never felt unloved for even a single day. William's face was turning red. Look, I didn't mean. I'm not finished. My voice stayed level, conversational. I'm also the CEO of Martinez Holdings, which as of this morning owns controlling interests in 3 of your primary suppliers. The room was dead silent now except for the sound of Patricia's champagne flute hitting the floor. And I'm the person who's been feeding information to the Chicago Tribune about your creative campaign financing and those interesting quarterly trips to Atlantic City that you've been writing off as business expenses. William's phone buzzed in his jacket pocket. Then Patricia's. Then half a dozen other phones around the room, all lighting up with news alerts. Check your phone, William, I said softly. I believe you have some reading to do. With shaking hands, William pulled out his device. The color drained from his face as he read the headline, Thornton Industries CEO under federal investigation for campaign finance violations. The room erupted. Gasps, whispers, the scraping of chairs as people leaned toward each other. Someone's wife grabbed her husband's arm. A waiter dropped his tray of champagne flutes, the crash echoing like punctuation. William's mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. How did you? I raised my hand, and amazingly, he stopped talking. Don't. You've embarrassed yourself enough for one evening. Then I turned to my sister. Claire stood frozen, her wedding dress like armor around her, her face a mixture of shock and something that might have been admiration. I held out my arm. Shall we? Her hand slipped into mine without trembling. Her eyes glistened, not with tears, but with understanding. With gratitude. With love. We walked together toward the exit, not to music, but to the sweetest sound I'd ever heard, complete and utter silence from William Thornton III. The real ceremony had just taken place. Not one of love, that had happened earlier in the church. This was a ceremony of respect, of truth, of a family that had always taken care of its own. By morning, William's life had imploded with the efficiency of a controlled demolition. The Tribune's story had gone viral within hours. By midnight, it was trending on social media. By dawn, 3 major news networks were camping outside Thornton Industries headquarters. The FBI issued a statement confirming they were reviewing allegations of financial irregularities. I sat on my apartment balcony with my coffee, watching Chicago wake up to a new day. My phone had been buzzing non-stop, reporters, curious acquaintances, even a few congratulatory messages from people who'd apparently been waiting years for someone to take William down a peg. Claire called at 7 a.m. Evelyn, what have you done? What needed to be done, I said, watching a jogger with a golden retriever disappear around the corner of Lincoln Park. The wedding photos are all over the news. Patricia called crying. She's humiliated. I felt a pang of genuine regret about that. Patricia didn't deserve to be collateral damage in her husband's reckoning. I'm sorry about Patricia. She seems like a good woman who married poorly. William's board is meeting this morning. There's talk of asking for his resignation. That's not my concern anymore. A long pause. Then, why didn't you tell me what you were planning? Because you needed to focus on being happy. That's always been my job, making sure you could be the person you were meant to be without carrying the weight of our problems. But now everyone knows. About Mom, about what you gave up for me. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. Good. Maybe now people will understand that family isn't about blood or money or respectability. It's about showing up. It's about sacrifice. It's about love that doesn't keep score. By 10 a.m., Tom Bradley called with an update. Thornton's stock is in free fall. Down 40% in pre-market trading. The board just announced an emergency meeting. Any word on the federal investigation? My contact at the FBI says they've been building a case for months. Your information just gave them the final pieces they needed. By noon, William's resignation was official. The board issued a statement about leadership changes necessary to restore public confidence. Translation: they'd thrown him under the bus so fast he probably had tire marks. Claire and her new husband, David, a genuinely decent man who'd been horrified by his father's behavior, canceled their honeymoon to Italy. They showed up at my apartment around dinner time with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant. You didn't have to do this, Claire said, settling onto my couch with her pad Thai. Yes, I did. Nobody gets to disrespect my family. Nobody gets to make you feel ashamed of where you came from or who raised you. David spoke up for the first time since they'd arrived. I owe you an apology. I should have stood up to him months ago. You're not responsible for your father's behavior, I said. But you are responsible for how you treat my sister from now on. He nodded solemnly. She'll never have to choose between me and her family again. I promise you that. That night, after they'd gone home to their new apartment, I sat at my kitchen table with a glass of wine and thought about the little girl I'd raised. The scared 6-year-old who'd clung to me while the paramedics worked on our mother. The teenager who'd worried about prom dresses and college applications. The young woman who'd graduated law school summa cum laude. She was strong now. Strong enough to stand up for herself, strong enough to choose her own battles. Maybe it was time for me to step back and let her fight her own wars. But not yet. Not completely. Some habits die hard, and protecting Claire had been my purpose for so long that I wasn't sure who I was without it. I was about to find out. 3 months later, I received an unexpected visitor. Patricia Thornton stood in my office lobby, looking smaller than she had at the wedding but somehow more substantial. Gone was the carefully arranged society wife. In her place stood a woman who'd clearly been doing some hard thinking. "I hope you don't mind me coming by," she said. "I got your address from Claire." "Not at all. Please sit." I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "Can I get you coffee?" "That would be lovely." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping coffee from actual mugs instead of china cups. Patricia looked around my office, successful but not ostentatious, functional but warm. "I owe you an apology," she said finally. "You don't owe me anything. You weren't the one who made those comments." "No, but I stayed silent when I should have spoken up. I've been staying silent for 32 years of marriage, telling myself it was easier to ignore his behavior than confront it." She set down her mug with shaking hands. "Did you know he gambled away our children's college funds? I had to take out a second mortgage on the house just to keep up appearances." I had known, thanks to Tom's investigation, but I didn't say so. The FBI investigation was the wake-up call I needed. I filed for divorce. After 32 years, I'm finally ready to stop pretending that love means accepting unacceptable behavior. "What will you do?" "I'm going back to teaching. Roosevelt High School offered me a position working with at-risk kids. Turns out my education degree is still valid after all these years." She smiled for the first time since arriving. "I want to help children who've had to grow up too fast, like you did." We talked for another hour. About fresh starts and second chances, about the difference between forgiveness and enabling, about how sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is refuse to participate in their destruction. When she left, Patricia hugged me. "Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like." That evening, Claire called with news. David got a job offer in Denver. Environmental law, exactly what he's always wanted to do. "That's wonderful. Are you going with him?" "We're both going. Fresh start, away from all the Chicago drama." She paused. "But I won't go if you need me here." 20 years of raising her, and she was still trying to take care of me. "Honey, I need you to live your own life. That's all I've ever wanted." "What about you? What's your fresh start going to look like?" I looked around my apartment, at the photos of Claire's graduations and achievements, at the life I'd built around making sure she had everything she needed. "I'm thinking about traveling. Maybe taking some of those college courses I never got to finish. Learn to paint, or speak French, or something completely impractical. You should come visit us in Denver. The mountains are supposed to be beautiful." "I'd like that." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and started browsing travel websites. Paris looked interesting. So did Tuscany. Maybe Australia, or New Zealand, or somewhere I'd never even considered before. For the first time in 20 years, I could go anywhere, be anyone, do anything. The girl I'd raised was now a woman who could raise herself. The job I'd dedicated my life to was finally complete. William Thornton III had inadvertently given me the greatest gift of all, the push I needed to start living for myself instead of just surviving for others. 6 months later, I was sipping wine at a café in Provence, reading Claire's latest email about her new job at a non-profit environmental firm. She sounded happy, settled, confident. She sounded like the woman I'd always known she could become. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "This is Patricia. Just wanted you to know that William's former board voted to establish a scholarship fund for kids aging out of foster care. Thought you'd appreciate the irony." I smiled and typed back, "Sometimes the best revenge is other people's success." The waiter refilled my wine glass and asked in broken English if I needed anything else. "Non merci," I replied in my slowly improving French. "I have everything I need." For the first time in my adult life, that was actually true. Behind me, the sun was setting over the lavender fields of southern France. Ahead of me stretched endless possibilities, countless adventures, and the freedom to discover who Evelyn Martinez could be when she wasn't busy saving everyone else.